Our next member of our panel is Nolan Ritchie. Nolan is the Executive Director of the Senate Transportation Committee for Senator Rafferty, who is the Majority Chairman. In this capacity, Nolan supports the transportation legislative priorities of Senator Rafferty and is responsible for the management of transportation-related legislation and policy in this Commonwealth focus on public safety, mobility, funding, and modernization of our transportation networks. Prior to moving to the Senate, Nolan worked at PennDOT for nearly 8 years in different management capacities in central office, including Special Assistant to the Secretary of Transportation, Innovations Officer in the Bureau of Innovations, and Administrative Officer for the State Transportation Commission. In relation to highly automated vehicles, Nolan is a lead staffer in the General Assembly on developing and evaluating the legislative framework for testing and deploying highly automated vehicles in Pennsylvania. Nolan was integral in drafting Senate Bills 427 and 1096 in this session, and Senate Bills 1268 and 1412 from the last session. He also organized the first legislative hearing in the Commonwealth on highly automated vehicles, and he continues to collaborate with over 100 stakeholders to understand their priorities on how to manage the next generation of transportation systems. Nolan received his master's degree in public administration from Penn State Harrisburg, and he has a Bachelor of Arts degree in political science from Lebanon Valley College. So please join me in welcoming Nolan Ritchie.
Awesome. Thank you. All right. Well, good morning, everyone. With this microphone, I feel like I'm a tech CEO going to launch a new product and talk about how significant it is and how it will change your lives. Instead, I will talk briefly on the process part of what we do as a staffer within the legislature. And it is probably one of the most rewarding jobs I have ever been in and will probably ever be a part of. And my role as executive director is to manage the transportation legislation for my boss, who is Senator John Rafferty. He may sound familiar because he was one of the founders of Act 89, which is pumping an additional $2.4 billion annually into our transportation network. So what I do on a day-to-day basis is to manage all the legislation that Representative Rothman was referring to. So just as many bills as they get in the House is almost as the number of bills we get in the Senate. Once the House passes a bill, it comes to our committee. If it would impact, let's say, Title 75, the vehicle code. And everything autonomous vehicles will be part of that realm. So it will be the job of the transportation chairs and the executive directors. Now, there are 3 other executive directors like me. We all work for a specific caucus, whether it's in the chamber of the House or chamber of the Senate. And what our role is to do that thorough evaluation of the legislation. We conduct a lot of research. We rely on other key staff, and I'm glad to see Greg and Matt are here as well. And what we do is conduct an analysis of the legislation. And I think, as Representative Rothman did point out, the issues of transportation generally are not partisan, but they definitely do have some resounding effects on how legislation does get passed, whether out of a committee or out of a chamber. And what we do is we prepare the analyses, we prepare briefings, we prepare talking points. We have lots of meetings. We have lots of meetings both internally with our leadership staff as well as other staff who may be working on a piece of legislation. And it's that continuous process that we are briefed, informed. We attend meetings on behalf of our transportation chairs. We give policy advice. We give legislative advice. We also do a lot of negotiations. One bill in particular, and I'm glad Representative Rothman brought this up, is Senate Bill 172. The last 2 weeks that we were in session before we broke for recess in June, I was basically one of the lead negotiators on that legislation. And it started on a Sunday night where I was told that this bill is going to move, so we need to get ready. So my whole 2 weeks, it was up and down, with the highs and the lows of trying to get a significant piece of legislation passed. The House did change it to the way that we were not pleased with, And we basically did a whole revamp, a whole rewrite of Senate Bill 172. But within that short time frame, my job was to basically get all of the stakeholders on board and to come to a negotiation where we could agree on. And thankfully, we in the Senate were able to successfully pass that piece of legislation, and we had 4 negative votes, and the bill is now residing in the House, where we hope that they will take it up as soon as they come back. So what we basically do at the staff level, we really like to encourage you as a coalition to continue to meet with us, to remember our transportation chairs at these types of forums and discussions, and to bring us ideas. You know, those ideas may require significant time, may take a number of sessions to get passed, and I think one example would be the hot lanes. I was at a panel in Philadelphia recently where we were talking about the next generation of transportation, and we currently do not authorize hot lanes here in Pennsylvania. And a person came up to me and go, "How can we get this done?" I said, "Well, we only have a few weeks left within the legislative session, so how about you just begin the research aspect? Start looking at which states have this passed. So looking at what states have done it successfully. How have they not made the greatest impact with their legislation?" And I would encourage that to you as well. And then I'll just leave with where we are within the next few weeks. Obviously, we will see an election in November. There will be changes within the legislature, whether more Democrat or maybe the Republicans will maintain the majority. But we will definitely see some significant changes with chairs. And I think both chairs in House Transportation, both chairmen are actually retiring. So that will definitely free up some new members, some new minds, some new ideas. And I look forward to this collaboration. Thank you.